Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 17 of Outside the Letterbox, the official podcast of the Letterbox.com. Today we're going to be discussing just kind of we're going to sort of try a new layout this week where we sort of just talk about film for a good half hour, and then we're going to move in to a discussion about Richard Linklater's Boyhood. That sounded weird, actually, when you say it like that.
Yeah,
Boyhood, directed by Richard Linklater.
It's not his specific Boyhood.
Yeah, so anyway, first, you can find more episodes of Outside the Letterbox on our website, the-letterbox.com, and on iTunes by just searching for Outside the Letterbox. You can also find us on Twitter at Letterboxers, and leave us a review on iTunes or comment on our site. I'm joined today by only one of my usual co-hosts. I messed it up, but Nick is here with me.
Our new format that we just discussed how we were going to set up.
Yeah, okay, so I'm Paul Duda.
I'm Nick Van Leeshout.
There we go. That's this format we just discussed. And so I'm gonna kick off the conversation by just talking about a movie I watched recently called Grand Piano. For those who don't know, Grand Piano is a movie starring Elijah Wood as a pianist, and basically the setup of the movie is that hold on, let me read the synopsis off of IMDb. Moments before his comeback performance, a concert pianist who suffers from stage fright discovers a note written on his music sheet. So that's very vague, but basically the note tells him to keep playing, or else first it's his girlfriend's going to die, then he's going to die, and he basically has to play the entire piece that he's playing without playing a wrong note. Otherwise somebody's going to die. And I wanted to talk about this movie real quick because it just it harkened back, I guess, to a lot of old school sort of thrillers. None that are coming to mind right now, but it just felt more like a Hitchcock thriller than anything else we get these days. These days we get a lot of action thrillers like Taken or Nonstop that have to feel super real. But at the same time, everything that's going on is not very believable. And Grand Piano just sort of takes a crazy sort of concept and has fun with it as a thriller. And it's a really entertaining movie. It's really well done. The director, Eugenio Mira, he does a really great job of making the film interesting when you're not really watching anything except Elijah Wood playing the piano. There's a lot of really cool shots. The cinematography is just sort of insane, and it's just a really enjoyable film. Nick, have you seen it?
No, although I heard a lot about it. I think it came out on video on demand and limited release at some point last year, and I remember it getting a lot of buzz. And then, did you watch it? Is it on Netflix right now?
No, yeah, Netflix right now. I was trying to remember because me and my girlfriend watched it at her house, and I couldn't remember if I watched it on Amazon Prime or Netflix, but I believe it's on Netflix.
Yeah, because I think it got another spike in interest recently when it popped up there. But no, I haven't seen it. Although, like you said, when you described to me the plot, it sounded a lot like one of Hitchcock's smaller, more experimental films, kind of like a Rope or like a Dial M for Murder or something where he's taking whether it's a new technical thing or even just the story and kind of seeing as far as he can go with one aspect of it,
Yeah, definitely, and that's really what you get here, because a good probably 45. The movie's only an hour and a half, which is fairly pleasant because most of the time movies these days aren't that short, especially movies like these. And I felt like for a good 50 minutes of the film, it's Elijah Wood playing the piano and trying to outwit this guy. there's in between. I've actually never seen a classical piano concert, but apparently there's breaks where the pianist gets a chance to take a break, and so during those breaks he's like running around the theater trying to figure this out, and then he has to get back on stage and play these pieces perfectly. And obviously, at least to my knowledge, Elijah Wood is not a concert pianist, and but the way they sort of make it look like he is very, very well done, and it's just an entertaining movie for sure.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would highly recommend you seeing it, Nick, if you haven't. I think you would really enjoy it.
Yeah.
Um,
Going off that, something unless you have something else on the movie you want to say.
no, go ahead.
Uh, I always find it interesting, kind of the career path that Elijah Wood has taken, because I was just thinking about this because I don't really know what kind of career I expected him to have, but I think like everyone kind of universally knows him from the Lord of the Rings movies, and if you kind of knew him before, it was like Deep Impact or Flipper, you know.
Right.
And it seems like in the past couple of years he's gone. I don't know how to say this without sounding like I'm making fun of him or whatever, but I mean it in a good way. Like he's gone like kind of like full on nerd or full on like kind of like these strange like smaller like stuff like Wilfred, uh,
Which is great,
stuff
by the
like
way.
Grand Piano or like Maniac. He's in the Maniac remake. It's all this stuff that like 10 years ago you never would have expected the main guy from Lord of the Rings to be doing kind of these crazy movies. He's one of those guys that just like every time he pops up in a movie, whether it's like Sin City or whatever, I kind of now roll along with it because it's like, oh, this is now what I kind of expect from Elijah Wood is to kind of pop up anywhere and everywhere, as opposed to like, oh, he's a very defined type of actor.
Yeah, well, the thing is the role that he played in Lord of the Rings is very while it seems like it would have the making of like a movie star somewhat, like it just felt like the natural progression would be more of an action or like movie star like Brad Pitt or Tom Cruise or something like that, especially since he was so young when he did the part. I think part of the problem is that he doesn't look different at all, for starters. Like
No.
he looks like he's 18 still, and also that role is like it's a very unique role in the sense that Frodo's supposed to be like 40 years old, but is a hobbit, so he still looks really
Yeah,
young.
it's not a traditional leading role or action role at all.
Right. So I think you're right in saying like it's sort of just a little. It's interesting to see his career path now versus what you might have guessed it would have been after the Lord of the Rings and after doing movies like Deep Impact. But I don't know. He's got like even before Lord of the Rings, he was in The Good Son, and that was weird.
I wish that was you could have a whole other conversation about the Good Son right now.
Oh, really? Does he like it?
I don't know. I just remember that he would always reference it. I don't remember if like he actually liked it or didn't like it, but it was always one of his go-to like I don't know. It's just a movie that he would always bring up.
Huh. Well, yeah, it's definitely. I was just gonna say like after because he followed up Lord of the Rings with Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, you know.
Yeah,
Um,
which is much more a supporting performance.
right, and I remember seeing him in that and thinking that was kind of odd, but at the same time, like he he plays that nerdy sort of like awkward guy who's he's trying to move in on the girl when she's in the process of literally erasing her ex-boyfriend.
Did you did you ever see Deep Impact?
Yeah, I saw Deep Impact.
So the only two things. So I saw Deep Impact like 15 years ago at a friend's house, and it terrified me because it was one of the first movies I ever saw where it was like, oh, the world like we could all die from like an asteroid or whatever.
That and
Um,
Titan AE, right?
Wait, say that again.
That and Titan AE.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, Titan AE. I remember seeing the trailer before Phantom Menace, and in the teaser trailer, the Earth blows up, and I remember like being in the theater with my mom and brother and being like, "Wait, that can happen." Um, but going back to Deep Impact, so the two things I remember from the movie, um, one is when the asteroid hits. I think it hits like the ocean or whatever, and there's a guy reading the newspaper, and a giant tidal wave just like takes him out, and I thought that was the funniest thing, even though it was like kind of terrifying. And the second thing I remember is Elijah Wood's character. Like I guess I barely remember the movie, but I guess there was like a spaceship that was gonna like save a bunch of people, but only certain people were allowed on, and like their family. So Elijah
Right.
Wood marries his girlfriend, and they're both
Yeah.
trying to get on the bus together, and they deny her, and so he's like jumping up and down, running around, going like, oh no, but she's my wife. Oh no, but she's my wife. And that's all I remember from the movie is like his really like timid voice, just like yelling that at people, and that's what I remember from Deep Impact. So I kind of don't want to rewatch the movie because I don't want to actually like know what else happens. I just want to remember that.
Well, you're that's pretty spot on. Although I will say, this is kind of probably an embarrassing admission, but I enjoy watching Deep Impact more than I enjoy watching Armageddon. Um, and I think that might just be like a Deep Impact is more of like a survival sort of disaster film, whereas Armageddon is, I guess, a little more proactive or active disaster film in the sense that
Oh
they're
yeah.
trying to stop the disaster. Um, so I don't know. I never. It's funny that those movies came out very close together. That's one of those like.
Yeah, it's always funny when you get stuff like that. You get stuff like that, or you get like Ants in a Bug's Life coming out 6 months apart.
Right.
I feel like that's quite a bit. Or like movies will come out within it. Like last year we had White House Down and Olympus Has Fallen, which
Right.
it was really weird for me because I saw both movies in theaters and it was not even 6 months apart, and it was just kind of weird to be like these movies almost kind of hit very similar beats, even though like the characters were different, and in one movie the enemies are like extreme patriots for the United States, and in the other movie it's North Korea and whatever. But it was still weird to be like, I feel like I've watched this movie in theaters like 6 months ago.
Right. Yeah, that's kind of a crazy sort of phenomenon because the one I said it twice already, I think, but the one I always remember is The Prestige and The Illusionist coming out so close together.
Oh yeah.
And talking with somebody, I'd always be talking with somebody talking about The Prestige, and they would all there was a specific person who always thought I was talking about The Illusionist, and they're like, I don't remember that happening, and I was like, I don't think we're talking about the same movie.
Yeah, I still haven't seen The Illusionist.
Oh, really?
I saw I saw The Prestige when it first came out. Loved it. I actually think if I had to choose, I think The Prestige would probably be my favorite Nolan movie. But I still haven't seen The Illusionist, and that was like 6 years ago. No, more than 6 years ago. What year did that come out? Like 2006?
8 years ago now.
Yeah, so like 8 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Um,
I've just never like I remember the movie had some buzz when it first came out, but like after that, like I haven't felt like an extreme urge to watch it. It's just been like every time like it pops up or whatever, it's like, oh yeah, I gotta check that out sometime.
yeah, I really enjoy The Prestige, but The Illusionist isn't. It's not bad by any means. It's an enjoyable film. I
That was
actually,
Edward Norton, right?
yeah, Edward Norton and Paul Giamatti and
Yeah.
Jessica Biel. Um, I'm actually going to take this conversation and flip it on its head to something else because I want to talk about it. Um,
Okay.
I saw Dawn of the Planet of the Apes this past week, and I know you guys
Oh
reviewed it
yeah.
last week, but I wanted to sort of talk about it just a little bit,
Yeah.
in the sense that I thought it was a great film and I really enjoyed it. And we talked about this a little already, Nick, but I don't. A lot of people have been praising it as being like a must-see movie, and everybody's got to go see Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, and I'm just not sure that I would necessarily agree with that, because I don't. While I think it is a great movie, I think it's still very much lies within being a Planet of the Apes movie. And I'm gonna, explain that. I'm gonna explain that a little. Hold on, in the sense
Okay.
that if you're not interested, I feel like if the idea of Planet of the Apes doesn't interest you, even after the last movie, The Rise of the Planet of the Apes, I don't think you're gonna be able to get into this movie either. In fact, I
I,
think you
I
might be able to get into this movie less than Rise of the Planet of the Apes.
I agree with that. That I think, like I've always said that the concept behind behind these movies is ridiculous, and I'm kind of proud that like we as a species has like been able to buy into it. Like the movies, the movie did really well at the box office last week, and is it's supposed to still do. I think it's supposed to, even though they had like three new movies open this week, it's still supposed to top the box office, which is kind of crazy when you think of a movie about like intelligent evolving apes, that originally started in the '60s
Right.
and was based on a French novel. Like it's all this stuff that's like, how is this like still connecting with people? And yeah, that's kind of interesting to talk about because my younger brother Rob, saw it like a day or two after I did, and I remember getting a text from him being like, "Oh, it was decent, but it wasn't anything great." And I was like, "Really?" And I was like, "Oh, that's kind of interesting." And it makes me wonder then, like, because the movie is doing so well, like what, because I doubt it's all these people who are like, "Oh, we're into Planet of the Apes and we love all the movies." And so is it just like apes with machine guns and people are like, "I want to see that"? Like, is it like looking at the poster and being like, that looks crazy, I'll go see that. It'd be interesting to kind of,
Because
I guess,
I would
interview
imagine
people.
it's a combination of both. Um,
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously it's a combination of both, but I'm saying like I don't know that you can say it's a majority one way or the other because a lot of people I think were turned on to the series by the last movie. I've seen all the Planet of the Apes movies, and the last one, but especially by today's filmmaking standards, was the easiest by far to take seriously. I think it was a
yeah,
little mixed up on what it was trying to say, but it was definitely the easiest of the series to take seriously, simply because it looked the best from a visual
yeah.
effects standpoint. So I think a lot of people were turned on to the series. I've watched the movies and I've enjoyed them, but the concept of it has always been something that while I'm watching the movie has just like bugged me while I'm watching it.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
yeah,
Like in,
like
way?
what's that?
Like in what way?
Well, just it's really tough to describe because it's like for example, Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, which I really enjoyed as a movie, the whole first section where you're with the apes just like bugged me. and I did,
Oh,
and
sure.
I like this and it's funny because I wouldn't say this is an argument for not making this type of movie because obviously this is doing great, and a movie that focuses on non-human characters I don't think is a problem. The problem is really just that they're apes. If these were dogs, it wouldn't bother me. If these were cats,
It's
it
kind of
wouldn't
weird.
bother me. The
That's
problem
weird.
is that monkeys, apes, the whole that whole animal species sort of like freaks me out anyway. Um, and every single time that someone was getting beat by an ape, there was a story of an ape getting free in the DC Zoo when
Oh
I was
yeah,
living
yeah.
in Virginia, and it escaped and like tore somebody's like limb off, and all the like 8 different things, like very graphic, gruesome things to this person. So
Hmm.
when in the movie when the apes are like beating somebody up, you, I feel like it's censored because they would be doing way worse things to these people.
Oh yeah.
Um,
That's. I mean, we talked. Joe and I talked about it last week, but that's the most terrifying thing in the movie, and kind of the thing I loved about the movie is the violence in this movie. Like you're so used to something like the easiest movie to talk about it is probably Man of Steel, just because so many people criticized the end of that movie for like not seemingly acknowledging like I don't know, like it seems like in a lot of these like summer movies, like there's extremes amount of violence, but because there's no blood or whatever, like we're all supposed to be okay with it. And this was the first summer movie in a while where like every death, like you know, and just like any person getting hurt or like whatever actually felt like it carried weight to it. Um,
yeah, I,
and and I
I think
wonder
there's
if
like
that's because of just like apes wielding guns, like that part when Koba is goofing around and then he grabs the gun and shoots two guys, like that's terrifying. That
Yeah,
scene. That's probably the scariest part in the whole movie.
that was so stressful.
Yeah. And the thing is,
um,
because like they do that scene twice, and the first time it ends okay, and then they bring it back again, and it's like, oh damn it.
yeah, exactly. The yeah, I think there's like a huge difference in you know, Dawn of the Planet of the Apes I think has violence, and then something like Man of Steel just has a lot of destruction. You know,
Yeah, that's a good point.
you don't see people dying in the buildings. You don't see, people getting thrown off ledges and stuff like that. You don't. But in Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, you see, people getting thrown off legends, ledges. Um, and I think I was listening to, I think the Slash Films podcast, or no, actually it was Screen Rants, and they were talking about how the reason something like the scene where the one ape gets thrown off the ledge by the other ape by Koba, the reason that scene is just barely watchable is because it's the non-human aspect of it. That if that
Yeah,
was
that's
another human, if,
yep.
the, if that was another human throwing another human off a ledge, and you saw that would immediately take you out of the movie and you'd be like, this isn't real, like telling yourself, in almost a slasher film kind of way, that
Yeah,
what's happening is
I
actually happening.
Yeah, I think if the apes had been replaced by other humans, the violence in the movie would have gotten it an R rating. I'm convinced of it. If it wasn't like apes, because that's always the weird thing with the MPAA is that they're okay with like terrible violence as long as it's not inflicted on another like a human being. Like it has to be like that's why like the X-Men movies can have like some intense moments of violence, like Wolverine like stabbing people because they're technically not human. And there's the great the scene in X2 where Stryker's men infiltrate the X Mansion. They had to have the masks and cover up the faces of those like SWAT guys because if they didn't have them on, it would have given them an R rating of him like stabbing him. But because they didn't have the masks on, or because they had the masks on, the MPAA technically classified those people as not human, which I think is
That's
just
so
bizarre.
weird.
That's a whole other discussion right there.
Yeah, that's so weird. I just watched that movie recently, before Days of Future Past. I remember watching it thinking, man, this is pretty violent for a PG-13 movie. So,
Yeah, and so it's just
um,
yeah, there's a huge double standard there. But yeah, Dawn. I think going back to what you're saying about like destruction versus violence or whatever. I think a huge part of that has to do with like the scope of the story, and even like compared to like Rise, this is a very small story and one that like if you're if you're considering like the history of like the Planet of the Apes or whatever, it's a story that almost you could ignore most of and just cut to the very end of the movie. But I think by focusing the movie on just like a very small group of people and a very small group of apes, like I think it lends itself to telling a better story. In terms of just being like, oh, it's the next installment, so we have to hit like, what's the next big event for the apes? Like they could have skipped right to the war part if they wanted to.
right, and that probably would have made for a more like epic kind of scale of a movie along the lines of what Marvel's producing these days.
Yeah, and
Um,
to me it's kind of similar to my reaction to the Wolverine when it came out, and I remember being like, "Oh, this is so awesome that we can still do like these small standalone movies when everyone's trying to do like multiverses." So I love it, because like you still get like it's still a Planet of the Apes movie. It's just not like it doesn't feel the need to like to top the last one because like the end of like even though this movie has a huge battle sequence, like they could have looked at the last movie and been like, oh, in the last movie the apes overthrew all of San Francisco, so this movie they have to overthrow all of whatever. Like there's always that. I feel like there's always that need in every sequel to like go bigger, and it's kind of like a problem that the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise had after like the third movie, because once you go to like the end of the world and you have the giant, whirlpool and whatever, like the only other direction to go is to go smaller, and so it kind of leads this effect of like you're used to going bigger and bigger all the time, and so when you go back to like doing something that's more concentrated, it kind of feels out of place. But when you just kind of like go from, oh, this is the story we need to tell, to, this is the story we need to tell, like I feel like it's less jarring, you know.
Yeah, definitely. You know what the movie reminded me of actually while we were watching it is the while I was watching it, it reminded me a lot of Jurassic Park,
Oh
and
yeah.
actually the probably more the Lost World specifically, but it just reminded me of that kind of like there's like big stuff going on, but it's like there aren't a ton of people involved, you know.
Yeah. And I
And
think another part of that is I think Michael Giacchino's score sounds very like John Williams esque, which is
oh
cool
yeah,
because he's also doing Jurassic World. So but I get what you mean. Kind of like you're in the forest, like even though it's not the Costa Rica jungle, but it still very much had that vibe of people against the elements.
yeah. And there's the 76 gas station.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Do you remember that
yep,
in the Lost World where
yeah.
the Rex
The
knocks the
ball.
yeah, exactly. And there's a site. I think that's what it was.
That's the
um,
best part of that movie of the Lost World is that whole San Diego finale.
really? You think so?
I think so. But then again, like that was when I grew up on that movie. That was the only part of the movie I ever watched because my cousin only had the last 30 minutes recorded. So it took me a couple years to actually see the rest of the movie. But I love the end of the movie because it's so different. Like it's like, oh, like what happens if dinosaurs get in the city? So I always kind of love that part because it just like was like, oh, we're not gonna repeat the rest of the movie. We're gonna do something new with it.
Yeah. It doesn't make that whole movie doesn't make a whole lot of sense in terms of like character decisions, but I do agree
Oh
that
no. Yeah.
that that finale is pretty entertaining, and I am really stoked to see Jurassic World.
Yeah, me too. Especially because Jurassic Park 3 is such a terrible movie. So I would love to get like if I mean obviously if the movie does well enough, I'm sure we'll see more Jurassic Park movies, hopefully that are good. But like if for some reason Jurassic Park 4 was the last word on the franchise, like it's got to be better than 3. I think
I'm
yeah,
probably
I'm
gonna get
excited for it.
pummeled for this too, but I like Jurassic Park 3 too.
Like
I like all three of the Jurassic Park movies. Obviously, the first one is like worlds beyond the other two, but I
yeah,
like all three of
I
them.
mean, I think Jurassic Park 3 has a lot of like good stuff in it. Like I love the pterodactyls. The boat sequence when they're on the river and they get attacked, I think is pretty cool. Um, but it just it's a lot of like story issues for me. Like it feels really insignificant compared to the first two. Like it feels like it's this small group of people that had no contact with the government, no nothing. Which is like it can work. Like that type of story could work, but it just felt I don't know. It felt like you could probably watch Jurassic Park 1, Jurassic Park 2, and then probably skip to Jurassic World, I bet, with the new movie. Unless like there's some connection to 3 they make because they feel obligated to. But I don't know. 3 just felt like it didn't really mean anything. Like even just the whole like, oh, we just came to get our son, you know. Um, I don't know. It just
Yeah,
the whole
that no,
movie kind of felt like a letdown to me.
that's fair. Like I think story wise, it's got a ton of problems, and the whole like oh the Velociraptors can talk to each other. That's pretty there's the way not I don't think that idea is stupid. I think the way it's executed is stupid in the
Yeah.
film. But the yeah the I agree, but I still enjoy all three of those movies. Um, but that anyway that's we sort of got to wind up our tangent section. I don't know what we're going to call that section of our podcast where we just sort of
I don't know.
the stream of consciousness section.
Yeah.
Was there was there anything else specifically you wanted to hit before we move on?
No,
All right.
I think I'm good.
Well, that is going to lead us into our discussion about the Richard Linklater directed film Boyhood.
I like how
Being
you praise yourself there.
Yeah, exactly. trying to be pretty careful about how I phrase this so it doesn't sound weird. Um, anyway, let me read the synopsis of Boyhood from IMDb. The life of a young man, Mason, from age 5 to age 18. So that's pretty much that's it, which I think
That
the
really
best
is.
way to sum up the film. And so Boyhood is just it's a film that follows the life of a child from the age of 5 to the age of 18. And what's unique about Boyhood is that it was actually filmed in that time frame. So they started when the actor was 5 or 6, and then they finished when he was 18. So they filmed for a couple weeks out of each year, and that's probably what makes this film so interesting and so, I guess, uh, admirable to a lot of people. And so I had a chance to check it out this past weekend, and I enjoyed it. But before we get into what we thought of this movie specifically, Nick, what do you think of Richard Linklater's other films?
So, so I hate it when people use this term, but I'm going to be a hypocrite and use it anyway. if if we're talking about directors, then Richard Linklater is my spirit animal. I like the way the basically um, I've always felt a strong connection to his movies. Dazed and Confused is one of my favorite movies of all time, and my favorite movie from him. And it was one of those movies where like I could look at it and be like, all right, I didn't go to high school in the '70s. I didn't go to high school in Texas, but I know these characters and I know what they're doing. You know, like I could look at it and I could see me, I could see my friends, I could see people I grew up with, and that's kind of been a reoccurring theme through a lot of his movies. Not all of them, but like even like there's like his characters always love to talk to each other, and so there have been times in his movies where characters have a conversation, and I'm like, I've had that conversation with someone. Like there's a great discussion in the opening of his first movie Slacker, where he's talking about the possibility of multiverses and how like there might be a universe out there where you're a completely different person, and then there's another world where it's just like one of your hairs is different or something like that. Um, and just through each of his movies, I've always kind of loved how his movies have been very like down to earth, grounded. They're not really like in terms of a story, like there's never really a huge like third act, like oh now we have to do this. Like it's very observational. Not really like sometimes it feels documentarian, and other times it feels like he's like an anthropologist or someone who's like going back in time and being like, oh, this is what these people listened to, this is what these people did in this specific moment in time, and I've always been fascinated by that. So every single time he's announced a new movie, I've always looked forward to it. And this movie in particular, like I remember seeing it pop up on IMDb like 10 years ago as just like untitled 12-year project. And I was always like, all right, what is this movie? And just so it's been cool to finally like get figure out more and more what it was, especially in the last year, because I feel like before this past year and before like they wrapped it and decided to send it to Sundance, like no one knew what it was. Like we never saw pictures, we never saw video. So it's been an interesting process just as a viewer to kind of like follow along them making the movie and kind of being like, oh, what are they doing? What have they been doing this whole time? But yeah, needless to say, I love Linklater. I'll always be there for whatever new movie he has coming out.
Yeah, so I have not seen all his movies, but the ones that I have seen, I'll start. Dazed and Confused is excellent. When I first saw it, I think I was 14, and I borrowed it. I took it from my brother without him knowing, my older brother, and watched it, and I didn't get it, and I didn't like it. But then I rewatched it in college, and I loved it. There's something like super nostalgic about that movie. And again, like you, Nick, I didn't grow up uh, in Texas or experience any of that specifically, but there's just something about it that you recognize, sort of in the nostalgia of it.
Mm-hmm.
But then he's got he's got some random other movies that I haven't seen the Before trilogy, although it's been on my list for a very long time. I haven't seen A Scanner Darkly, but I've seen School of Rock, and
Rock.
I like School of Rock. All right, I think it's a little overrated. I enjoy it though, and then I've seen Me and Orson Welles,
Yeah,
which I'm even surprised to have learned that he directed. And that's a decent movie. I've seen Bernie. Bernie's actually really good. Bernie's
yeah,
hilarious. But I think that Linklater's strengths lie in sort of, like you said, sort of his observational skills. Something like Dazed and Confused just stands um, far above his other movies, because it's just so unique in its structure that there isn't really a three-act structure to it. You probably could find one if you really
yeah.
if you really tried to sit down and do it, but it's not trying to do that. It's just trying to show like one one night, like at the beginning of summer. For some people, it's the end of high school. For some people, it's the beginning of high school. Like, and it's really fascinating to watch that. Uh, so anyway, that sort of rounds out what we think of his films. What did you think of Boyhood, Nick?
So I mean, it probably shouldn't come as a surprise, but I love the movie, and I think it kind of goes back to, and this is something that I want to talk in more depth in a little later, but I'm at least 4 years ahead of this kid. You're what, like 5 or 6 years ahead of the character in this movie,
Right.
um, and so it's interesting, and kind of the thing that I think Linklater does best, kind of what we talked with Dazed and Confused. Like, he knows that not everyone grew up during this time or whatever, but he knows what makes those times special and unique. And so, like, I saw it with someone who's also older than me, and it was interesting because there are certain points in the movie when like a song would come on, and I would be like, oh, for this kid, it's when he's in like sixth grade. For me, it was ninth grade, and then for this other person I was with, it was my freshman year of college.
Right.
Um, but that being said, like if you look at like the actual story of the kid himself and ignore all of kind of like the pop culture or like the technological stuff that kind of changes as the movie goes on, I think I think it's something that a lot of people can look at and be like, oh, like I recognize myself, or I recognize like a younger sibling or someone. Like I feel like this movie, um, like there's a lot there's a lot to like reflect on. I feel like after watching it, and I don't think I've still kind of unpacked everything that I felt during the movie. But needless to say, I loved it. If the movie had kept going on after the ending, I would have been all for it. At that point, like I was very invested in these characters. So yeah, I can't wait to watch it again.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with most of what you said. I do have like I have issues with the film primarily because of how highly it's being acclaimed. But that's not. I do agree with everything you said. Like, it's a very. I walked out of the movie honestly feeling like I had just lived 12 years with these
Yeah,
characters, and that's pretty awesome to do in 3 hours. That's a really impressive thing to do,
yeah.
and I think he does it really well for the most part. And I really do like the movie. I think it's a great film, and just very different. One of the best things I think about it is that feeling of like really living with those characters. There are times throughout the movie where I was trying to like guess if the kid had aged between scenes.
Oh yeah,
Um,
yeah.
because I was like, is he a year older, or I can't tell. Like, I'm not sure.
Well,
Like,
that's
especially
that's one of the things I love
when
about.
he's younger, before they started changing
Yeah,
his hairstyles a lot.
yeah, and that's one thing that we should note, and kind of that I loved about the movie is that it doesn't list like it doesn't have like titles saying like year one or like 1 year later or whatever. So you actually kind of have to work to like figure it out. Like you always have to be paying attention to be like, oh, have we changed? Like, and you're kind of looking for clues whether like, oh, does the mom look a little different? Does the sister look different or whatever? So I love that part because I feel like it actually kept you engaged. Like it was like the audience is smart enough to figure out when it goes from one year to another. We don't have to tell them.
Right, and that's actually something the film does really well too, in the sense of, well, while I think some people will say it doesn't really focus on the kid. What it does do really well is sort of portray these events in this kid's life as he would have seen them. You know,
Yeah,
that
I remember hearing someone describe it as the whole movie is Mason at the end of the movie, like his memories of growing up.
right, and that's what's so interesting is we don't always get all the drama behind, for example, there's the part in the film where his mom marries the drunk. We don't get all the drama between his mom and her husband, but what we get is what he sees of it, and that was really well done in the sense that you still got a complete story out of it. You still knew what happened by the end of it, and being an adult looking at it, you probably had a better idea than, say, the kid had, but
Yeah.
you're still seeing it as the kid would have seen it, and that was
Yeah.
really fascinating and well done to me.
Yeah, and even like so she marries another guy after that, and they don't even show like the breakup. Like that things are going wrong, but he's just gone one year, and you kind of like you can fill that in. It's like the story. The film doesn't have to repeat itself, and it kind of goes to something I mentioned, and I think you were going to kind of refute me on, but I'm going to try to explain it better. Is that I loved how the movie didn't focus on like stereotypical highlights, even though like if it focuses on like him going to college and whatever. But like the high school graduation, like in a typical movie, they would have shown everything. But instead, the movie starts like when Mason's coming back from the ceremony and he goes back home, and everyone's like, "Oh, we're gonna have a little party." Like to me, it always felt like it was showing instead of like these are the highlights that like society has set up in our lives. It was more like, "Oh, we're gonna focus more on how the character sees that." You know?
Yeah, and that's fair. Like, I guess the way society sees the highlights is supposed to be, like, you don't really, like, you don't see him lose his virginity and stuff like that. You see the aftermath of it, or you see him like lying about it, or stuff like that.
Yeah, and kind of like he has a girlfriend at one point in the movie, but it's kind of like established like it's not his first girlfriend. Like there's no first kiss scene or anything. So like all like the standard tropes of the coming of age story. Not that like they're not there, but they're not done in the way they usually are.
Yeah, and I think for some people that might be a drawback of the film. It wasn't for me, but the fact that the film is not, there's nothing in the movie um, dramatically for the main character that's particularly cinematic, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
It's all
I think there's still the whole thing of what are you gonna do? Like that's the big question that comes up. Not in the beginning, like it's more kind of like if you're gonna put a third act on this movie, like that's the closest you come to it. Um,
Yeah,
but
but
yeah,
what I'm saying is that I don't. This is not a movie that I would say, especially to everybody listening to this podcast, that they would enjoy watching. Um, and
um,
'cause no,
that's
because like the
that
people.
well, because I'm gonna agree and I'm gonna disagree with you, but I'll let you go.
I'm just saying the people who go out to see a movie to be entertained, I don't think this movie is going to satisfy that desire. I don't know that this movie is even going to be in a place where those people are going to be able to see it, or be in
Yeah,
a.
yeah. If you're
But,
talking, yeah.
but
Um,
I'm talking about. I'm just going to bring this up because it's a movie that I gushed about a lot last fall. But a movie like Gravity is the type of movie that I could recommend to somebody who enjoyed the Transformers films. You know,
that's true. That's
like
true. Yeah, yeah.
it's a strong film throughout because it's entertaining, it's exciting, but it's also like fairly heavy hitting in terms of its themes, as simplistic as they might be. This is not that kind of movie for sure, and I don't think it tries to be. I don't think by any means it tries to be, but that does sort of I guess that's like a caveat to us praising it, is that it's not it's not very cinematic.
Yeah, I mean, like there are a lot of people I would and have recommended this movie to, but like Joe Buck in the middle of nowhere is not going to be the first person I'm going to recommend it to. Not to say that he wouldn't like it, because you never know with this type of movie. Because the like I said before, the thing I love about all of Linklater's movies is even if the specifics aren't the same for you and me, like there's something still at the center of the movie that touches you. Um, and so let's just say I'll leave it at this. I wouldn't be surprised if if this were at the top of movies that like people you wouldn't expect to like this type of movie liked. Like if they saw it and were like, oh, like, and then they get into it because there's something that speaks to them. Not
Yeah,
saying it would be a movie they would immediately like, but if there was a list of movies that they could potentially like, this would be towards the top of that.
I guess so. I feel like it's not a movie I would necessarily say people would have to see in theaters. I would say if they're gonna watch it, they have to watch it in an environment where they're going to pay attention to it. Like,
Very, very true.
don't
Yeah,
watch it with your computer open. Don't watch it, while you write a paper. Like,
yeah, because there are
watch
a lot of
watch the movie because it's really strong and it's worth watching all of it. Um,
yeah.
but
There were a
what I
lot of
mean
small
by you
details.
don't have to see it in theaters is there's nothing about the movie that's particularly impressive about seeing it on a bigger screen.
Hmm. I mean,
And
I mean, I get that. I mean,
that's
I mean,
all I
that's
mean
kind
by that. So,
Yeah.
um,
But I very much agree with you of like having to pay attention, because there are a lot of like little moments of things that come back years later, whether it's like a character or a character trait. Like I remember there's one point in the movie where I think it's in the first year where the mom is talking to Mason about how she had a meeting with his teacher and how he doesn't hand in his homework, and it's not that he doesn't hand in his homework, it just gets all stuffed at the bottom of his backpack. And then I can't remember if it's year two or year three, but he's like hurrying to get ready for school, and you see him stuff what appears to be a piece, his homework at the bottom of his backpack in the hurry to like get out of the house. And it was one of those things that's like, oh, like that's a nice touch, especially when you think about the whole thing of like this movie being made over 12 years and like remembering like character continuity.
yeah, and it's funny that you say that because the scene after he gets his haircut and he's upset about it, you see him turn in his homework.
Yeah,
He's holding it in his hand, and you see him put it in the inbox without being asked, which is like a point later. That's kind of funny. Um,
yeah.
yeah. So there's something else that I want to talk about in this film, and not so much not. I want to talk about the young actors in the film, because I think Ethan Hawke and who's the actress? Who's plays their mom?
Patricia Arquette.
Yeah, Patricia Arquette. They do a great job. They do a phenomenal job with their
Hmm.
characters. I think all the adult actors do a really good job. But I specifically want to talk about, I guess the actual characters and the actors who portrayed them in Mason, the main character, and his sister Samantha. Mason is played by Eller Coltrane, and Samantha is played by Lorelai Linklater, who is Richard Linklater's daughter. What did you think of their performances?
So quick thing I want to mention before. So I saw this movie last night at the ArcLight here in Hollywood, and afterwards they had a Q&A with Ethan Hawke and Eller Coltrane. So I might bring up stuff that Eller might have said just for reference purpose. But I thought the kid performances were great. And I think it's always an interesting thing when you talk about kid performances, because like there's some people who um, I love how now that I'm trying to think of an example, I can't think of one, but that they kind of give a performance that's like why that's well beyond their years. Like it's like, oh, this person is going to be an actor someday. But with these two, I felt like they felt like real kids to me, um, and especially because whether it was like stuff that I saw in me and my siblings or whatever, or just like other little kids that I've noticed, like I mean, they did a really good job of basically like being who they were supposed to be and who they were in that moment. And it's kind of an interesting thing in terms of acting, because I mean, sure, like there are a lot of like adult actors who have to play like the same stage they are in life, but I think it's a different thing to ask a kid to do that, and to kind of grow with that. And you were asking like if there's any differences or whatever between the characters. It was interesting in the Q&A last night of they were asking how much of Mason is an Eller, and he was like, well, it's hard not to, like the character is such a huge part of him, but at the same time they would kind of have to deviate. There would be certain things because I guess like, Eller the person got into some stuff like, whether it's music or whatever, like years before a normal kid would have. So they were like, okay, we're not ready to tell that story yet, so we're gonna hold off on that. But at the same time, like his development completely affected the way they went about that movie. I guess Richard Linklater said at one point that he thought the character of Mason would have become a musician, and then it was apparent that that's not where the actor's taste is going. It's going more towards like art and photography.
Right.
So I think I think the two kids did phenomenal jobs. Like it's not something that you're going to be like, oh, that moment where they showed this huge emotion or whatever, because that's not what the kids, that's not kind of, they're never really asked to do that in a particular scene. And they kind of, I just feel like they react the way a kid is supposed to,
Yeah. Okay. I'm. I honestly think Alec Coltrane did a phenomenal job. I think he was great. I will say his character, and I think this is, by the structure of the film, I think his character by the time he's like a junior in high school, like a sophomore and junior in high school, is kind of annoying. And I think that's by design though, because I think that's like a high school like character, like a person in high school.
I mean, like if you look back at, I'm sure some of the stuff that you wrote or you said at that time, you would look back on it and be like, I can't believe I did that, or I thought that, or.
Yeah, exactly. But I have to say though, Lorelai Linklater's performance bothered the heck out of me the whole movie.
Really, that's interesting. Because I thought it was great, and all the people I've talked to or heard from about it thought it was great too.
Okay, and it's there. It might. I want to see the movie again to see like if I was seeing what I thought I was seeing. But there were moments in the movie where it looked like she was looking at somebody off camera, like for long periods of time, where she was not like in the scene at all. And it kept happening.
I think I know what you're talking about, but I feel like it's more of like to describe her character as shy isn't accurate, really, especially because she's more outgoing than Mason is a lot of the time. But I feel like it was kind of more the teenage, like, I'm not really looking at the person I'm talking to.
Yeah, maybe, but the problem is that like there were some points where it wasn't just looking away. It looked like she was looking like for something, and like she almost didn't know what to say. I have to watch the movie again, like to see for sure. But all I know is like my initial reaction, and this was also because this is just a side note. There were things about the color treatment in the film that you could tell that they were using different cameras by the end of the movie, or at least different color grading techniques to make it look more recent. Because the stuff at the beginning of the film is very sort of it's colorful, but it's all sort of like
Well, I mean, it looks like it was shot in the early 2000s.
Early 2000s, exactly. And then the stuff at the end of the film looks like it was shot, in 2012 or 2013, which is not. You might say that's just because of what they used to shoot it. But there's ways to grade the footage so that it would all look the same.
I guess, but at the same time, like I'm kind of. I think
like, that was a specific choice. I honestly think they chose to go with that.
That's interesting because I've heard that like they were trying to maintain the same visual look throughout the movie, and I know that they shot and filmed the whole thing. But I wonder if it's like one of those things that you can't control, like film stock changes over time. Like there's a reason why film stock in the 70s looks different than film stock in the 80s, and I'm sure when you film for 12 years, like there's bound to be a difference. And I know you're saying that there's a way to fix it, but so I don't know. That's a question for the filmmaker that I would be interested to get more specific on. But to me, I kind of liked it because it was interesting to be watching the movie in the beginning and feel like I was watching something from 2002 or 2003 and feeling like I was watching like a lost movie, and then having it slowly move into to like, oh, I'm watching a movie that came out today.
Right. Uh, all I want to say in about some of the scenes that were acted or put together is in some ways, some of those scenes, and I don't know that I would just blame this on the Samantha character, but there were specific scenes that felt like they came out of a Disney Channel original movie to me. Um,
Like
and
which
that's
ones?
like
Where should we get it?
what's
I
that?
mean, it's not really a movie that can be spoiled, but I feel like there are moments that can be spoiled. So do we want to like
Well,
get a
okay.
little
I'll,
more?
I'll I'll just break it down. A lot of the stuff when they're younger, when they're like 7 and 8 and 9, probably up to the point where they're like 12, and then the scene where they're having breakfast and they're talking about the dad not being or having not seen the dad in 8 years. Like that's the joke. Um,
Mhm.
her performance specifically felt like it was something from a Disney Channel original movie, whereas the people around her didn't necessarily feel that way. Another specific scene that I'm thinking of is the scene where she's in her room with her friend, and maybe this is just because I have a lack of interaction with teenage girls that are like that, that I felt that way, but up really like there were just moments in her performance that irked the heck out of me, and I'm not saying she's a bad actress. I'm saying to me it felt weird. It felt out of place, and there were times where it just felt like way too much. And then there were the parts where it looked like she was looking almost for like a cue card off camera. Um, that bothered me. There's the one other scene that I'm going to mention is the last scene where they have dinner or breakfast together as a family, where it's just those three, the mom and the two kids, and she's got this line, and she's just like, I think does she say I'm sick or I'm not feeling well? But she like draws it
Okay.
out for forever, and that's an exaggeration, obviously. But just the way she says it, I was like, I don't believe you. I don't believe that you're sick. I believe that you're acting like you're sick. Um, and
I don't know. To me, I mean, going back to the point you made earlier, like I could point to moments in her performance where I'm like, oh, that reminds me of one or many of my cousins, or like a friend I knew, or something one of my sisters did at one point. So like, I think that might be a reason why I can buy into it more than you can, maybe, is because like I there were a lot of moments in her performance where I could be like, oh, that feels real to me, just because of personal experience with someone else.
yeah, I don't know. I just didn't. Her performance just didn't feel as real to me as others. I'd like to see it again. I mean, I have three sisters, two older ones and one younger one, and there just wasn't with her performance specifically. There wasn't anything there. But either
Yeah.
way, we got to kind of wrap things up. I really enjoyed the film. If it's the type of film that you think you'd enjoy, I would highly recommend going to see it in theaters. If you're saving your money for more more intense action stuff for the movie theater, then definitely see this when it comes out, and when it's available to see outside of the theater, and pay attention to it. Did you have anything else you wanted to say, Nick?
Yeah, kind of just one last thing is it'll be interesting to see how this movie changes over time, because in for us especially, like we said earlier, we're not that far off from the character in this movie, only about like 5 years. And so it was interesting watching this movie with an audience, which I think the audience I saw it with was a pretty young audience, like in their 20, probably 20s. Um, and so there are a lot of moments when like the kids are playing Halo or Dragon Ball Z is on TV, and so everyone is like, "Oh, I recognize that," and so it'll be interesting to see how the movie changes going forward, because obviously when they were making the movie, they had no idea that this stuff would like affect us. Like there's a great conversation in the movie where they talk about future Star Wars movies and if it's ever going to happen. When they shot that scene, like they had no idea that when the movie would come out that we would have all these announcements about multiple Star Wars movies. And so today when you watch it, like everyone in the theater laughs at that and thinks it's funny.
Right.
So it'll be interesting to see how this movie changes like years down the road and how new people coming to it look at it. Because
Yeah.
you know, the response in the theater I was in was very reactionary to a lot of stuff in the movie. And I think a huge part of that was that recognizability outside of just like the essence of the movie, kind of like, oh, look at that, you know, look at how big that computer is, or look at, you know, this or that, you know.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things that I'm looking forward to in rewatching this movie is seeing how the experience of watching it changes over the years.
Yeah.
Especially with like, you know, the possibility of like, you know, in 10, 20 years down the road, being married and having kids and being like, oh, maybe like I relate more to, you know, the parent characters than the kid characters, you know. That's one thing I'd be interested to hear because I haven't heard from anyone specifically who's a parent seeing this movie. Like I look at the movie and like I either see myself or I see like younger siblings in it. Like that's the main focus for me. So it'll be interesting to see what like more adults or parents think of the movie and if they connect more to the adults than the kids or whatever.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's gonna round up our podcast for today. You can find more episodes of Outside the Letterbox always on our website, the-letterbox.com, as well as on iTunes. You can also find more articles about movies and movie news on our website, the-letterbox.com. Leave us a review on iTunes or comment on our site. Nick, where can people find you online?
They can find me on Twitter at Sean92.
Or on the Letterbox. And you can find me on Twitter at PFDUDA, that's at PFDuda, as well as writing stuff on the Letterbox. And I guess we'll see you guys next week.